In our headlines on this Friday afternoon, July 28th, here in South Korea. President Yoon Suk-yeol commemorates 70 years of ceasefire on the Korean peninsula by honoring the selfless sacrifice of service members under the UN who fought alongside South Korean soldiers. And North Korea hosts a military parade Thursday night amid the 70th anniversary of the signing of the Korean Armistice Agreement, with delegations from neighboring China and Russia reportedly in attendance. This year's July is forecast to be the hottest month on global record, according to pundits at the European Union and the United Nations, as global heat enters uncharted territory amid climate change. President Yoon Suk-yeol has highlighted the service and sacrifice of soldiers under the United Nations in safeguarding South Korea's freedom. Our senior presidential office correspondent Oh Soo-young reports.
Solidarity for freedom is what the Republic of Korea stands for, grounded in the dedication of the United Nations forces who fought to defend the country. That's according to President Yoon Suk-yeol speaking at a ceremony on Thursday, standing at the Busan Cinema Center, a former military airfield in the southern port city of Busan, where the UN troops first landed to fight alongside the South during the 1950-53 war. The ceremony marked the 70th anniversary of the Korean War Armistice Agreement, which ended active fighting, and also coincides with the UN Forces Participation Day.
73년 전 자유세계의 수많은 젊은이들이 하나의 UN 깃발 아래 전혀 알지도 못하는 나라 대한민국의 자유를 지키기 위해 달려왔습니다. 오늘의 대한민국은 유엔군의 희생과 헌신 그리고 피 묻은 군복 위에 서 있습니다.
Yoon honored the more than 1.9 million UN troops from 22 countries who came to the South's aid following North Korea's illegal invasion. Calling the UN troops the country's true heroes, Yoon personally greeted the 62 UN veterans attending the event and presented awards to two veterans, the late Thomas Colon Parkinson from Australia and Donald Reed from the US. The president vowed to never forget their sacrifices and the bloodshed to fight communist forces, which enabled the South to grow as a liberal democracy and market economy. He noted that Busan City, which saw over 1 million refugees during the Korean War, is now the world's second largest transshipment port and a global logistics hub, with the city now preparing to host the World Expo 2030 and position itself as a platform to seek solutions to the challenges facing humanity. Yoon said South Korea will ensure the value of freedom extends to the future generations.
대한민국은 국제사회의 책임 있는 일원으로서 자유민주주의 국가들과 연대하고 한미 동맹을 핵심 축으로 하여 인도 태평양 지역뿐 아니라 전 세계의 자유, 평화, 번영을 위해 노력할 것입니다.
US President Joe Biden on Wednesday had declared July 27th National Korean War Veterans Armistice Day, calling the ROK-U.S. alliance the linchpin of peace, stability and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region and around the world. Ahead of the ceremony, President Yoon and First Lady Kim Gon-hee were joined by government officials from the 22 countries comprising the UN forces to pay their respects at the United Nations Memorial Cemetery. The burial ground in Busan is the only UN cemetery in the world. More than 2,300 people from 11 countries lie at rest there. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
In the U.S., a solemn event to mark the Korean Armistice Agreement was held in Washington as well. Participants, including veterans and families of fallen heroes, gathered at the Korean War Veterans Memorial as Ambassador Cho Hyun-dong honored the selfless sacrifice of American soldiers, adding that they are the root of the alliance between South Korea and the U.S. Expressing deep gratitude, he also forecast a stronger alliance in the future amid North Korea's hostile ambitions. And Seoul's Veterans Minister Park Min-sik has echoed those words of gratitude to all those who fought for freedom here, crediting them for South Korea's post-war achievements. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung sat down with him.
A big week for South Korea as it marked the 70th anniversary of the Korean War Armistice. Speaking to Arirang News, the Minister of Patriots and Veterans Affairs Park Min-sik highlighted the progress South Korea has been able to make thanks to the dedication of foreign veterans.
Wasn't it just ruins during the war? South Korea was able to overcome the ruins and make truly amazing progress. We want to repay our greatest gratitude to the veterans through our success.
Delegations from 22 countries, including 64 Korean War veterans, visited South Korea's port city of Busan to take part in various events. Minister Park explained there is a special reason behind Busan being the host city this year.
Busan was the wartime capital, and it was also the place where war veterans from 22 nations first arrived in this unknown country at the time. It's also very symbolic, as about 2,300 UN veterans are still buried in Busan.
With ongoing threats to global security, the minister also stressed that the Korean War delivers an important message to the international community.
For example, Russia is invading Ukraine. Even there, many government representatives, including our president, are really emphasizing the spirit of solidarity for freedom. The Korean War and the 70th anniversary are evidence that such efforts are not just words, but they have been put into action.
Park also underlined that Veterans Affairs and national defense come together, considering the fact that North Korea continues to threaten the South and the international community through its continuous provocations. The minister also told Arirang News that he feels regretful when it comes to the limited significance our society puts on veterans' affairs today.
When it comes to veterans, people would reluctantly bow their heads to show respect. But our country isn't doing things properly if we aren't properly honoring those who sacrifice for our country. It is not just the past, but it's the future. It's the practical foundation for the prosperity of South Korea.
To show the further appreciation South Korea has toward all those who gave a helping hand, the minister vowed to create a culture where Korean people can naturally feel the importance of veterans' affairs.
우리 참전 용사분들의 70년 전의 위대한 희생과 헌신에 대해서 우리 대한민국 국민들 아직도 또 앞으로도 영원히 진심으로 감사를 드립니다.
Choi Min-jung, Arirang News, Busan.
Meanwhile, across the border, North Korea marked the 70th anniversary of the armistice with a military parade as largely expected. Now, while details of that event have yet to be fully disclosed, our Unification Ministry correspondent Arirang covers what has been shared thus far.
North Korea staged a huge military parade on Thursday night as widely expected to mark the 70th anniversary of the armistice that ended the Korean War, or what the North calls Victory Day. The opening ceremony for the event started at around 8 p.m., followed by the parade, which went on for about 2 hours. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and government delegations from China and Russia who had come to Pyongyang this week also attended the parade. This appears to show that the North is backed by the two neighboring countries. One expert also says the delegation taking part in the event likely means the North's COVID-19 lockdown is coming to an end.
The North Korean regime is moving inching closer to actual opening of the national borders, which means that the resumption of trade with China in full scale in coming days.
The North Korean Central News Agency earlier on Friday reported that the latest unmanned aerial vehicles and the intercontinental ballistic missiles were rolled out during the event. The multi-purpose aerial vehicles and unmanned strategic reconnaissance aircraft that were demonstrated had been on display at a weapon exhibition that Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and Kim Jong-un had visited earlier on Thursday. ICBMs, including the Hwasong-18 and Hwasong-17, topped off the parade. Other than unmanned aerial vehicles, no other new weapons were introduced. The North Korean leader appears to have not made a speech this time. Instead, the North's defense minister did so. The minister warned about nuclear war during his speech, saying that it's a matter of who, when, and how will the war happen on the Korean peninsula rather than whether it will happen or not. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin delivered a message to the North Korean leader on Thursday. The message included Putin's gratitude towards Kim for North Korea's support of Moscow's special military operation in Ukraine, saying that this shows their, quote, shared commitment and resolve to counter the collective West and its policy. Putin's message also said their history of bilateral ties had led to a stronger economic and security relationship. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
In other news, Seoul's foreign ministry called in a senior Japanese diplomat on Friday morning that is, to protest Tokyo's renewed claim of a Dokdo in its latest annual diplomatic blue book. Director General for Asia and Pacific Affairs Seo Min-jung summoned acting deputy chief of mission at the Japanese embassy here in Seoul, Mondo Yamamoto. The ministry also shared a statement that condemned Japan's unjust claims over Korea's Dokdo Island, pointing out that such unwarranted assertions hinder efforts to promote a future-oriented relationship between the two countries. Japan has been falsely laying claim over South Korea's Dokdo for the past 19 years. Also, on this Friday here in Seoul, President Yoon Suk-yeol has tapped his advisor for external affairs, Lee Dong Gwan, as chairman of the Korea Communications Commission. Should he be appointed, he pledged to make Korea a leading player in the global media industry. He also vowed to fight fake news and ensure reliable public broadcasting. Now, his nomination has sparked an uproar from the main opposition Democratic Party, whose members accuse Lee of an earlier media crackdown and his son of school bullying. Lee previously served as a spokesperson and senior secretary for public relations under the Lee Myung-bak administration. Here in Korea, we have 3 days left before the end of July, but already this particular month is looking to go down in history as the hottest on human record. Our Lee Seung-jae explains.
July 2023, even with a few more days left to go, is still set to become the hottest month on human record. That's according to the World Meteorological Organization in a report published Thursday, which noted that the heat this month has been so extreme that it's virtually certain this month will break records by a significant margin. It added that the world has seen the hottest 3-week period on record in more than 100,000 years, with figures based on average air temperature across the entire world. The global average air temperature in the first 23 days of July was 16.95 degrees Celsius, far above the previous record of 16.63 degrees Celsius recorded in July 2019. In response to the alarming figures, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Thursday warned that the era of global warming has ended and that the era of global boiling has now arrived.
Climate change is here, it is terrifying, and it is just the beginning. The era of global warming has ended, the era of global boiling has arrived. The air is unbreathable, the heat is unbearable.
Stressing that the level of fossil fuel profits and climate inaction is unacceptable, Guterres called on world leaders to stop making excuses and begin making substantial changes now. Meanwhile, in response to the record heat the U.S. is experiencing this summer, U.S. President Joe Biden said at the White House on Thursday that the high temperatures will be more severe in the future, adding that no one can deny climate change. While mentioning that more than 600 deaths occur every year due to high temperatures in the U.S., he announced new steps to protect workers, including a hazard alert notifying employers and employees of ways to protect themselves from the intense heat. The latest announcement from Biden comes as nearly 40% of the U.S. population is facing heat advisories, according to a recent report by the National Weather Service. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And back on the local front, industrial production, retail sales and facility investment rose in June for the second month in a row. According to Statistics Korea on this Friday, industrial production expanded 0.1% on month. The expansion, however, is lower than the 1.1% growth posted back in May. Chip production grew 3.6% on month in June, but this growth marks a plunge of almost 16% on year. Regardless, chip inventory shrank as exports expanded, albeit slightly. Efforts are in the works to put in place tax incentives that serve to strengthen business investment and sharpen the edge of corporate Korea in the global arena. My colleague Ji-young has details.
Boosting the competitiveness of South Korean companies for stronger economic growth and helping people's livelihoods. This is what the country's latest revision to the tax code published on Thursday mainly aims to do, as well as prepare for the future.
This year's tax revision has put emphasis on providing strong support for South Korean firms to better compete in the global market, including those in the Korean content industries and national strategic technology.
One of the highlights would be sharply raising tax relief for Korean content makers so that more K-dramas, movies, and reality shows can be brought to the world. After the change, for expenses spent on content production, the government will grant up to 15% of tax credits for conglomerates, 20% for strong medium-sized firms, and 30% for small and mid-sized companies. The tax code revision also aims to provide higher tax relief for firms investing in the semiconductor industry and other strategic sectors that'll drive growth for the country, known as the K-CHIPS Act. Tax credits for conglomerates investing in chip facilities will be up to 25%, and small and medium companies will be getting up to 35%. Also, there would be greater tax benefits for companies returning to the country from offshore operations by providing them 100% of income and corporate tax cuts for the first 7 years and 50% in the following 3 years. Another major part would be reducing the tax burden for small and mid-sized family businesses when it comes to inheriting them by putting more companies into the lowest tax bracket of 10%. The term for payment will also be dramatically extended from the current 5 years to 20. With all the changes, the government says the tax code revision will result in a roughly $390 million drop in tax revenue. But the finance minister explained, although it is a difficult time, the tax incentives were allocated to much-needed areas, including prompting corporate investment and child subsidies. Ji-young, Arirang News.
Right, and the government's tax benefits are also looking to be extended to families. Our Lee Soo-jin explains.
South Korea's revision to the tax code this year includes measures aimed at boosting the local economy. The latest tax revision published on Thursday by the Finance Ministry seeks to expand tax benefits not just for newlyweds but also for the lower and middle classes.
We plan to increase support for the lower and middle classes to help the private economy recover quickly and to actively address structural issues such as the population decline.
The most highly anticipated tax revision was arguably the tax exemption on funds gifted by parents to their children when they get married. The government has decided to expand the threshold from $39,000 to around $117,000 for inheritances given by parents to their children 2 years before or after the date of their marriage registration. In a more direct move to help boost birth rates, the government will also increase payments provided to families from around $620 to around $780 per child. The income limit for families eligible was also raised from around $31,000 to nearly $55,000. In addition, taxpayers can qualify for tax credit rates that amount to 15% of medical expenses that exceeded 3% of their total income. The tax credit limit of around $5,500, however, will no longer apply to children under the age of 6 starting next year. It's also not just people that are benefiting.
VAT exemptions will be applied to more than 100 types of pet medical expenses starting October this year.
The government is also looking to improve people's livelihoods. It will raise income tax deduction rates by 10 percentage points for credit card expenditure between April and December next year at traditional markets and on recreational activities. The 2023 tax reform bill, which will be submitted to the National Assembly in September, is expected to go into effect next year. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In Russia, President Vladimir Putin on a Thursday promised free grain to 6 African nations. The promise was made on the first day of a 2-day Russia-Africa summit in St. Petersburg. Putin said that Burkina Faso, Zimbabwe, Mali, Somalia, the Central African Republic, and Eritrea will each receive 25 to 50,000 metric tons of grain at no cost. The offer follows the collapse of the Black Sea deal, which allowed Ukraine to export grain worldwide and helped reduce soaring food prices. Russia refused to renew the deal, claiming that Western sanctions were limiting the sale of its agricultural products abroad. Russia's promise has been criticized by the United Nations, which described it as a handful of donations to some countries. The UN also said it won't have the same impact as the previous grain deal. Now, supporters of the coup which ousted Niger's President Mohamed Bazoum have set fire to the headquarters of the ousted ruling party in the capital of Niamey. The attack on Thursday came after Niger's army pledged its support for coup leaders. The coup started on Wednesday when the Presidential Guard took the president captive by sealing off access to the presidential residence and offices using military vehicles. This over what the Guard said was a deteriorating security situation and poor economic governance. The coup has received global condemnation, including from the United Nations, the United States, France and Russia, who have demanded the release of the president. It's unknown who has taken charge in the country, as no leader has been announced. A Ukrainian fencer has been disqualified from the World Fencing Championships in Milan for refusing to shake the hand of her Russian opponent. 4-time Olympic medalist and world champion Olga Karlan beat Russian Anna Smirnova, who was competing under a neutral flag. But after her win, Karlan refused to shake hands, instead offering her saber to tap blades. In fencing rules, not shaking hands can result in a black card. Smirnova refused the blade tap, instead staging a protest and speaking to several tournament officials. But Karlan is not the only Ukrainian athlete to refuse a handshake with a Russian opponent, with others, including some tennis players, also refusing the gesture. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Much of Korea is enduring the toughest time of the year with intense heat continuing to sear more parts under heat wave alerts. And afternoon temperatures are hovering at 35 degrees Celsius this afternoon. It's a steamy one with scattered showers in the forecast. There will be 5 to 40 millimeters of rain this afternoon, possibly getting more than 60 millimeters, along with thunder and lightning. Despite the chance of rain, we also need to stay safe in the sun. Have your sunblock and sunglasses ready. And if you're in Korea, I highly suggest that you get an umbrella that gives both sun and rain protection and keep it handy around this time. Drink plenty of water and take regular breaks when going outdoors. And take those vitamins to keep your energy up. Heat will linger through the night. We'll have a similar weather pattern to today through the weekend. It won't get any cooler for the next couple of weeks, so take good care. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
And those are the headlines at this hour, but do stay with us for our panel session coming up right after this break. Thank you for now.